Special Envoy continues for the second day intensive meeting with different Yemeni fractions to revive the political process. The United Nations mission to support Hodeidah agreement, UNMAHA, calls for ending escalation in the city. Save the Children organization says Houthi rebels have turned schools into military camps. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Shazad Delbey. United Nations envoy Hans Grunberg continues his political talks in the Egyptian capital, Cairo. On his visit that started yesterday, UN envoy said his efforts to revive peace opportunities in Yemen will take two main tracks, the first of which will concern with urgent issues. In the second track, Grunberg said he will deal with matters linked to the military, security, and political aspects. Yemeni Chief of Staff Saghir bin Aziz said Iran and its arms are the source of evil and chaos in the region. He added in the Manama dialogue held in Bahrain that the Houthi militia met all peace agreements and initiatives with rejection and continuous escalation. The Chief of Staff called on the Manama dialogue to support the legitimate government in the battle to end the Houthi coup and thwart Iranian rebellious plans. United Nations mission to support the Hodeidah agreement said it is closely monitoring alarming reports of intensive clashes south of Hodeidah. UNMAHA repeated its calls for all parties to exercise restraint. The mission reminded the parties of their obligations to protect civilians and to prevent any further escalation. UNMAHA stressed that it stands ready to ease the dialogue between the parties. Governor of Hodeidah carried out an inspection visit to the recently liberated areas in Hais district south of the governorate. The governor praised the sacrifices of the joint forces, praising the coalition's continued support for the joint forces in facing Iranian project in Yemen represented in the Houthi rebels. The director of Hodeidah Police, Brigadier Najib Waraq, visited the liberated areas north and east of Hais district in Hodeidah. He was briefed on the situation in the liberated areas in Hais and Barak districts. During his visit, the police director called on humanitarian organizations to provide assistance to the people in the liberated villages.
Those fighters who joined the Houthis and returned home, they have been taken by force by the militia and they have been sent to death again. The rebel militia has no honor and can never be trusted.
In Hodeidah, the joint forces discovered a house that was transformed by Houthi rebels into a weapon supply.
مصنع كله ما يجي المخازن مصنع عين ما قوم هلا عندنا قطعان ولا ما في داعي لقطوا الطائرة تدور يا خبرة الطائرة تدور لقطوا يلا تحركوا صور يا عبد الله نصورها كلها الحين عايزين يضربوا المخزن جوانا هي لا الحمد لله الحمد لله الحمد لله بسرعة
In Ma'rib, the government forces and the popular resistance thwarted the Houthi militia's offensive attempts on military sites in Dana, south of the governorate. Sources indicated that the fierce battles took place between the two sides that lasted for more than 8 hours. The coalition in Yemen announced it has carried out 5 operations targeting Houthi militia on the western coast. The air raids that took place during the past 24 hours targeted military vehicles and missiles for the rebels. It added that 22 operations were carried out in Ma'rib, destroying 16 military vehicles and killing 115 Houthi militants. Save the Children organization said 460 schools were completely destroyed by the Houthi shells, while more than 2,500 schools were damaged. The organization said some of the schools were used for military objectives. The organization added that the militia's destruction of schools or turning them into military camps forced 400,000 children to leave school. A Yemeni human rights office said that the Houthi militia had recruited 9,500 children from the capital Sana'a since the beginning of war. The office reported that the Houthis are violating international humanitarian law, which bans the recruitment of children under the age of 18. He added that the Houthi militia is recruiting children and throwing them into war fronts. More than 4,000 children were killed because of the conflict in Yemen. More on the story is within this report.
The conflict in Yemen, the intensification of hostilities, the multiplication of active front lines and armed groups and forces, compounded by the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, has resulted in acute suffering for Yemeni children, their families, and their communities. According to the UN Children's Fund, more than 10,000 children have been killed or maimed since the escalation of the conflict in March 2015, equivalent of 4 children every day. According to the UN, the country's humanitarian crisis continues to be the worst in the world. And as per Henry Tefor, Executive Director at the UN Security Council, children are the main victims of this ongoing mad war, and peace is the only solution to save them.
Without peace, we cannot help these children, we cannot help the people in need, and there will be no return of livelihoods. 22 million people in need. That is an extraordinary number. 11 million of those are children. 80% of the population is under the poverty level. We have 8.4 million that are on the brink of famine, and a child dies every 10 minutes. So you say to yourself, this is more than the population of Switzerland.
This latest wave of violence makes a desperate situation for children and families even worse. Millions of children at risk of death, injury, starvation, or disease, as the world's worst famine in decades looms. An estimated 1.7 million children are internally displaced, and more than 2 million are out of school. Nearly 2.3 million boys and girls under the age of 5 suffer from acute malnutrition, and around 8.5 million children do not have access to safe water, sanitation, or hygiene. Save the Children warned that just when Yemeni children need the world's help, overall funding levels currently stand at less than half of what's needed. This year, funding for the organization's treatment of children impacted by the conflict has reduced by more than 40% compared to last year. This funding shortfall will affect children like 8-year-old Omar, who was out playing in the city of Taiz a few weeks ago when an artillery shell exploded nearby, seriously injuring him and killing his elder brother Mahmoud. Yemeni children have been living through a horrific and endless nightmare for 7 years now. Children continue to be killed and injured on a near daily basis. They go to bed hungry, see people starving to death, and miss out on school. Every day, children risk death or injury if they venture outside and get caught up in the frequent shelling and bombing of places where they should feel safe, like homes, schools, hospitals, and marketplaces. The atrocities and immense suffering endured by children in Yemen are the result of an armed conflict that will invariably leave a generation of Yemeni children scared for life. Peace is the only solution, and child survivors need full support to heal and rebuild their lives.
Coming next, the World Food Programme warns from a massive famine hitting Yemen.
اضطرينا أن نغادر من ذي وزحنا.
الله يستبدلكم يا محولتني لا الله يستبدل.
Welcome back. World Food Programme warned that the crisis in Yemen is devastating for a lot of families. The United Nations organization added that the food prices and hunger continue to rise. More on the story is within this report.
No one can imagine the condition of a poor Yemeni family without income in the midst of the war in Yemen for 7 years, and the extent of the suffering experienced by this family in order to survive. The World Food Programme confirms that millions of Yemeni families have been affected by the continuation of the war. Malnutrition rates among women and children in Yemen remain among the highest in the world, with 1.2 million women and 2.3 million children requiring treatment for acute malnutrition. Nearly 400,000 of them are at risk of dying without treatment. Despite the ongoing humanitarian assistance, 16.2 million Yemenis still suffer from food insecurity. Access constraints continue to pose a serious challenge to the World Food Programme in several areas, especially where conflict is intense. Due to access and security challenges, the World Food Programme and its partners struggle to deliver assistance to the vast majority of vulnerable people in the country. In response to high acute, moderate, and severe malnutrition rates among children, World Food Programme is providing nutritional support to 3.3 million pregnant and nursing women and children under 5. Also, food assistance is provided for those most urgently in need of support in what has emerged as one of the world's worst hunger crises. The World Food Programme provides nearly 13 million people with food assistance, as in-kind rations of flour, pulses, oil, sugar, salt, vouchers, or cash to purchase the same quantity of food, aiming to provide relief to the poorest and war-affected families. Human Access, in partnership with the World Food Programme, through general food assistance, was able to improve the nutritional status of about 65,500 families in the governorates of Taiz and Lahj, who benefited monthly from the project during the period from January to October 2021. The project included 3 sub-projects, which are Cash Aid Program, Food Vouchers Project, and General Food Assistance. Abdullah Muqbil, the project manager, stressed the importance of increasing funding for the humanitarian response to provide multiple life-saving services and to reach more Yemeni families who were unable to obtain humanitarian support and face major challenges in obtaining food. Millions of Yemenis are marching towards starvation. People don't have money to buy anything while the Yemeni currency deteriorates and the food prices spike.
Taiz Hospital launched an urgent call for help to support patients with kidney failure. The center stressed the need to provide new filters to save the lives of hundreds of patients.
We directed a call for distress to beneficiaries to support patients of kidney failure for doing a full maintenance of the unit. But if there is no possibility for a full maintenance, that could bring filters. This is the main problem in the center currently. Within a week or 10 days, if we do not solve this problem, the center will stop its work. And this will have catastrophic consequences on the patients.
Deterioration of health system in Yemen has affected a big section of people. Demands for maintaining health services continue to rise. More on the story is within this report.
As a result of the ongoing conflict in Yemen 7 years ago, and despite the living conditions that Yemenis are going through, there is a tragedy that is more severe than that. The fragile health situation puts the lives of millions at risk, and the difficulties in providing health services have become manifest in the deterioration of health outcomes. Reports dealing with the health situation of Yemenis indicate a deteriorating health situation amid the current conflict conditions. This includes high levels of child malnutrition, low immunization rates, and outbreaks of communicable diseases. The health of the mother and the child is particularly affected by the worsening situation. The latest estimates indicates that one mother and 6 newborns die every 2 hours. Moreover, the conflict has also caused direct damage to the health of the population. The war has become the third cause of death, after heart disease and newborn diseases, and the death rate has increased as a result by 70%. While there are 1.2 million pregnant or breastfeeding women and 2.3 million children under 5 who need treatment for acute malnutrition. The health system in Yemen relies a lot on external funding, and health services are provided primarily through organizations that implement health projects. However, the external financing of the health sector witnessed a significant decrease from previous years, which made the health system in Yemen vulnerable to severe risks. The World Bank indicated that the availability of functioning health infrastructure facilities such as hospitals and primary care centers has become hard to obtain during the conflict. According to the study, a large proportion of the population faces challenges in accessing health care, as only 50% of health facilities are working at full capacity, and more than 80% of the population face major challenges in obtaining food, drinking water, and healthcare services. The World Bank warned that internally displaced people who live in crowded informal settlements or densely populated neighborhoods on the edge of the cities are at high risk of outbreaks of infectious diseases and other health challenges, as there are 3.6 million IDPs across the country at present, including 700,000 people who live in more than 1,700 random sites scattered across the country with little or no services at all. The situation is dire for all Yemenis. They are deprived of their simple basic rights to live, and the only solution to this seems to be the end of this insane war.
Minister of Oil and Mineral Resources discussed with the Chinese ambassador to Yemen joint cooperation. During the virtual meeting, the minister stressed the importance of Chinese investment return to Yemen, especially in finishing work in the power plant at Aden Refineries Company. For his part, the Chinese ambassador affirmed his country's readiness for a full cooperation and his support to encourage Chinese companies to work in Yemen. A Yemeni organization accused some local banks and money transfer networks in government-controlled areas of money laundering for the benefit of Houthis. The organization said these associations are importing Iranian oil to avoid the U.S. sanctions imposed on Tehran. Local sources in Aden said many of the car owners went to the showrooms for sale. The sources said this trend comes after a new rise in fuel prices in Aden. During the past weeks, the city witnessed a crisis of gas in which the price jumped to the black market to 30,000 riyals. The Yemeni riyal recorded a new collapse in Aden. Banking sources reported that the value of the US dollar reached 1,524 riyals. At the same time, food prices rose in the past 24 hours. The price of a bag of wheat reached 45,000 riyals, recording an increase of about 13,000 in less than a month. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. United Nations Special Envoy continues for the second-day intensive meeting with different Yemeni fractions to revive the political process. United Nations mission to support Hodeidah agreement calls for ending escalation in the city. Save the Children organization says Houthi rebels have turned schools into military camps. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.